It's Brother Kachakwala coming back at you with a lesson in the spirit, giving all glory, honor, and praises to Yahweh Ba'Shem Yahweh Shai Ba'Shem Hakodash. Double honors to the apostles and elders, great millstone, who will and teach well. Peace, love, salutation to the elect 144 first fruit. So I'm going to do a little like a basic history lesson, I guess. I think this lesson is going to lead up to the lesson. I know this sounds wrong, but the lesson I really want to do pertaining to the Battle of Megiddo. But I just want to paint the picture of how the Battle of Megiddo came to be. And of course, when I do that lesson on Battle of Megiddo, it's going to be about Josiah, Pharaoh Necho, so on and so forth. But I want to get to a point to where we understand why and how. Well, this lesson is going to be why and how the Egyptians and the Assyrians, actually allied. Well, it may be like that, but first we're probably just going to go ahead and what I should have did was just to do everything decently in order and chronological order is just like go through the Egyptian empire and their history, a little bit of that, their rise and their fall, but I'll probably do it the next lesson, didn't get to the Battle of Megiddo, but this is pretty much, as you can see on my page in a Wikipedia, Assyrian conquest of Egypt. Usually when you read of a conquest of a certain, it means like a taking over. You could read about the Assyrians in Second Kings, also in the Chronicles, Second Chronicles. You hear about them a lot when you read about King Hezekiah's reign. That king was Shalmaneser, if I'm not mistaken. But the king, I think the king before that was, what's his name? Tiglath-Pileser, something like that, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. I know I have it written down somewhere, but let me go ahead and just read a little bit of this so we can understand time frame. So it says the Assyrian conquest of Egypt. The Assyrian conquest of Egypt covered a relatively short period of the Neo-Assyrian Empire from 673 to 663 BCE. The conquest of Egypt not only placed a land of great cultural prestige under Assyrian rule, but also brought the Neo-Assyrian Empire to its greatest extent. Right. Ah, man, where's my book bag? Salaki Akim. I gotta find it. Alright, I got my book bag. I'm about to pull out my Apocrypha. Because, like I said, sometimes it's just easier to look things in the physical book than just to go off the top of the dome. Because I have certain things written down. So the Assyrian Empire ruled for 200, give or take, years. I have written down 201 years, total of 9 kings, and an average rulership of 22 years. So the time frame that we're going to be speaking in, of course, here is the 673 to 663 BC, and that was during the time. I'm gonna give some dates here as well, because I think King Hezekiah was during the. Okay, yeah. King Hezekiah, if y'all want to write this down, his dates range from 729 to 699 BC. So this would be after King Hezekiah, during King Hezekiah's reign. That's when the Assyrians really came and invaded Israel. You can read about that in 2 Kings. Matter of fact, I got it 2 Kings 19. 2 Kings 19, and also 2 Chronicles, starting at like the 29th chapter. You can read about that in King Hezekiah was during the time, I know I mentioned Tiglath Pileser, and that was the Tiglath-Pileser III, which he was reigned in like 745 to like 727 BC. And then Shalmaneser, which is spoken about, that's who King Hezekiah really went back and forth with. His rule was from 727 to 722 BC. So just to paint the picture of the time frame, but what I really want to do is get to the extent or the pinnacle of the Assyrian kingdom, which is during this time, 673 to 663 BCE, when they ultimately took over the Egyptians, you could say. All right, so that brings me to one of my precepts in Isaiah 7 and 18. I'm just going to apply this precept. Again, I'm just applying this precept. All right, it's not the actual breakdown of this, but I'm just applying this precept to what history entails. Now, one thing, if you want to call it a breakdown, that is true, is Isaiah was during the time of the Assyrians. So he was prophesying during the time of the Assyrians. Who else was prophesying during the time of the Assyrians? Jonah. All right. When you read about Jonah, because he was told to go prophesy against Nineveh, which Nineveh was the capital of Assyria during that time. So this is Isaiah 7 and 18. It says, "And it shall come to pass in that day that the Lord shall hiss for the fly that is in the uttermost part of the rivers of Egypt, and for the bee that is in the land of Assyria." All right, so Isaiah speaks heavily a lot about the Assyrians coming down on the Israelites. He really prophesies a lot about it. Matter of fact, I have another precept here in Isaiah 10. I'm going to start at 5, but I'm going to get to it here in a second. But the reason why I wanted to bring this and apply it as application to what we're doing or what I'm going through is because it says the utmost part of the rivers of Egypt, and for the bee that is in the land of Assyria. So Assyria ultimately took over the Egyptians, not totally eradicating the Egyptians, but had them in subjection, which what we read here in the first part was when they took over that was the greatest extent. And that was after King Hezekiah. Okay? That was after King Hezekiah's reign. All right? So let's read. I've been mentioning Hezekiah a lot. So King Hezekiah, 741 BCE is what it's saying. Born sole ruler from 716 to 687. I got different dates from different sources that lined up a little bit more accurately than that. That's where I got Hezekiah's reign from, where he reigned from 729 to 699 BC. And then if we do the math. Okay, matter of fact, let me go ahead and get Second Chronicles real quick. Second Chronicles 29. That's when you can read about Hezekiah in the Chronicles, at least. Salaki. All right. So it says, Hezekiah began to reign when he was 5 and 20 years old, so 25, and he reigned 9 and 20 years in Jerusalem, and his mother's name was Abijah, the daughter of Zechariah. Okay, so where I get 729 to 699, if you do the math there, that's 30. Okay, but the scripts say 29, so of course he probably started his reign middle of that year type time frame. Okay, and it ended up being 29 years. Okay, so he ruled for 29 years. Okay, and it says in the biblical narrative, Hezekiah witnessed the destruction of the northern kingdom of Israel by Sargon's Assyrians in 722 BCE, the king of Judah during the siege of Jerusalem by Sennacherib in 701 BC. Okay, so he was during that time where Israel's going back and forth with Assyria, but it was prophesied, bringing me to my next precept, by Isaiah. Because we got to understand too, before King Hezekiah, who ruled, Salaki, before King Hezekiah, who ruled, Ahaz. All right. And matter of fact, let me go to chapter 28 and go ahead and get Ahaz. One second, Salakia. All right, let's go. Ahaz ruled before him, and he did what was good in the sight of the Lord. But of course, when we read about a lot of kings of Israel, they did what was evil in the sight of the Lord. I don't know the last three, the previous two kings before Hezekiah actually did right in the sight of the Lord. But of course, there's always repercussions for things that are done wrong prior. All right. So Isaiah 10:5 says, "Oh, Assyrian, the rod of mine anger, and the staff in their hand is mine indignation. I will send him against an hypocritical nation," and that's speaking about the Israelites. "And against the people of my wrath will I give him a charge to take the spoil and to take the prey and to tread them down like the mire of the streets. Howbeit he meaneth not so, neither doth his heart think so, but it is in his heart to destroy and cut off nations, not a few." So Isaiah was already prophesying that the Assyrians were going to come down and pretty much destroy the Israelites. Okay, so let's go back to here, understanding how Assyrians got into their power. So that's just a little backstory on just some history on Hezekiah and things of that nature, which I may do a separate lesson going more in detail of that. But now we're in the time frame of 673 to 663 BC. Okay, so that takes us to where was really, what was Isaiah saying here about the Assyrians coming down? Okay, about the Assyrians coming down, because what was going on in Israel, at least in Israel, 673 to 663 BC. All right, I'll tell you what was going down. Matter of fact, there we go. Soft. Manasseh of Judah. Okay, he ruled for 55 years in Israel. Okay, and during this time was during the time of the Assyrians. All right, King Manasseh ruled from 687 to 643 BC, as you can see right here, which was during the pinnacle time of the Assyrians. All right, and we understand what he was doing in the land of Israel. And for 55 years, he was going smickety smack off. Okay, matter of fact, we can just go ahead and get it in 2 Chronicles, the 33rd chapter. Just read just a little bit. It says, Manasseh was 12 years old when he began to reign. He reigned 50 years in Jerusalem, and he did that which was evil in the sight of the Lord, like unto the abominations of the heathen, whom the Lord had cast out before the children of Israel. For he built again the high places which Hezekiah his father had broken down, and he reared up altars for Baalim, and made groves, and worshiped all the host of heaven, and served them. All right, so of course that's wood and stone, and of course the Lord is a jealous power. So therefore Israel had to get taken down. Okay. All right. And ultimately, that's really what happened. And then when you get to what I have already up, well, no, the next chapter, Jeremiah started to prophesy against Israel about the wrath that was coming from the land of the north, which are the Chaldeans, but we'll get to that later. All right, so we understand that the pinnacle reign of the Assyrians was during the 673 to 663 BC. All right, and that's how they got their power. But when we read Second Chronicles, the 35th chapter, who did Josiah intercept? He intercepted Pharaoh Necho of Egypt. So that goes to show you, even though they took over Egypt, Assyrians still had a prominent type power, but something was boiling up in the back end, which were the Chaldeans, the Babylonians. Okay? So now we're coming to the fact of how they allied with one another, understanding that this bigger power was coming to play. Okay? So I just wanted to set, like, I guess, a foundation to how we're going to get to Second Chronicles 35th chapter, which is the Battle of Megiddo. And in my next lesson, I'm going to do detailed information on the Battle of Megiddo. So how we got there was first the Assyrian conquest of Egypt, which they took over Egypt. But Egypt wasn't gone yet. As we understand, Egypt was big time during the 1400 BC. But the Lord got us out of there. But they still never dwindled away. They still had some type of power, but it wasn't enough to control the Israelites, you could say. Then the Assyrians came up about, had the conquest of Egypt, and ultimately took it over, as you can see right here from this map. That was Assyria. And of course, Israel was encompassed in all of that. Okay? Was compassed in all of that. And just like it says in Isaiah, the 7th chapter, it says the uttermost part of the rivers of Egypt. So that shows that what? The uttermost parts of the rivers of Egypt here, okay, was taken over by the Assyrians, which gave them power, okay? Which gave them power. And we read about the power that they exercised on the Israelites during the time of King Hezekiah, okay? And they actually came and invaded Judah, all right? And they came and invaded Judah, which was kind of fulfillment of the prophecy here in Isaiah, the 10th chapter. Okay? All right? So the Assyrians came up and had their power all the way at the pinnacle point of 663 BC, which is ultimately going to take us into around going into 640, about 20 years later, when King Josiah took reign. And that was pretty much during the downfall or the turning point of the Assyrians ultimately being wiped out. But the Egyptians and the Assyrians linked up, and I'll do that on my next lesson. I'm probably going to go through Isaiah, 2nd Chronicles, the 34th chapter, and the time frame is going to be starting at there is going to be 640 to 610 BC, because that was the reign of King Josiah. He ruled from 640 to 610 BC. He ruled for 30 years, okay? And then we're going to go ahead and get into the prophecy that was laid out by Jeremiah in 2nd Chronicles 34. And then we're going to get into some more understanding of how the Assyrians and the Egyptians clicked up and why they clicked up to go against the Chaldeans when Nebuchadnezzar was coming up. All right? So Lord willing, this was a good foundation, and it was kind of understanding. I know I was here and there and everywhere, and I threw a lot of dates out there, but I'm just trying to set the foundation of what I'm going to go into next. And I'm going to try to go ahead and get into the Battle of Megiddo, the prophecy that Jeremiah was speaking about, reading Jeremiah, the 25th chapter, okay? And then, well, that'll be going a little ahead. After the Battle of Megiddo, I'm going to get into the Battle of Carchemish, which was a transfer of power where the Assyrians and the Egyptians were ultimately destroyed by the Chaldeans, then that's how the Babylonians got into, their true seat of power. All right, so Lord willing, this is edifying. We'll give all glory, honor, and praises to Yahweh, Ba'ashem, Yahweh Shai, Ba'ashem, Chakodash. Double honors to the apostles and elders of great millstone and rule and teach well. Peace, love, salutation to the elect 141st fruit. Until the next time, we'll say shalom, and like always, repent, for Yahweh Shai is coming back sooner than what me and you believed. Shalom.